Her birthday morning began in silence, and that silence felt heavier than any sound. The sun was already bright through the curtains, warm and gentle, but the room still felt strangely quiet. Sandra Bullock woke up with the kind of hope she did not admit even to herself. She never demanded attention. She never liked drama, and she never expected parties. But there was always one person she thought would remember without being reminded. One person who never failed to make even the simplest day feel meaningful. That person was Keanu Reeves. She checked her phone. Nothing. No good morning message. No silly birthday voice note. No joke about getting older. Just empty notifications. It was strange because Keanu was always the one who remembered the small things, even when the world forgot. He was the person who would notice if she was tired before she said a word. He was the person who silently replaced her broken pen just because he knew she loved writing by hand. He was the one who sent her tea when her voice was weak during filming. He noticed everything. So how could he miss this? And yet the day went on. Nothing came. Not one word from him. The suspense did not start instantly. In the morning, Sandra tried to stay calm. She told herself maybe he was busy. Maybe he planned to call later. Maybe there was a time zone confusion. She tried to laugh it off while brushing her teeth. She even spoke out loud and said, "It's just a date." It does not matter. But the truth was, it did matter. It mattered because Keanu was not like everyone else. He never treated her like just another co-star or just another friend. He was the kind of person who remembered the first time she learned to ride a bike, the first time she said she wanted to act, the first time she cried after an award speech, because the speech did not feel honest to her. He remembered the real her, so why forget now? She arrived on set, ready to film the new scene. Everyone seemed normal. The crew was busy adjusting lights, checking sound, moving props. But something felt off. People looked at her and smiled, but the smiles felt like they were hiding something. No one said the words she expected. No one said happy birthday. No one even hinted at it. Even the makeup artist, who usually hugged her every year and brought her a cupcake, acted like it was just another morning. Sandra stayed quiet. She did not want to look like she was waiting for a celebration. She hated attention that came out of obligation. But a small ache began inside her chest. Not because she wanted balloons or cake, but because she began to feel invisible, and then she saw him. Keanu walked in, calm as ever, dressed in simple dark clothes, holding a coffee as usual. He nodded at a few people, greeted the director, and walked straight past her without a single word. Not even a smile. Not even a quiet, "Hey, you good?" Sandra stood still for a moment, frozen. She waited for him to turn back. Maybe he would joke. Maybe he would suddenly surprise her. Maybe he was acting. But he did not turn around. He simply went to the other side of the set, sat down, and began reading the scene notes. That was the moment the silence turned into something else. Not confusion. Not anger. Something deeper. A strange kind of sadness. She thought, maybe I misunderstood our friendship. Maybe I expected too much. When the camera tests began, Keanu finally walked up to her. She prepared herself to hear something, anything, even a small line like, "Big day today?" But he just said, "Ready for the scene?" Just like that. No birthday, no smile, no emotion. She nodded, forcing herself to stay professional. Acting felt easier than real life at that moment. In the scene, she had to look calm and strong, so she used that to cover what she really felt. Every time the director called, "Cut," she hoped Keanu would speak. He never did. The day moved forward hour after hour, and with every hour, the silence grew heavier. A part of her thought maybe he would surprise her after the last scene. Maybe he was pretending all day for some reason. But when lunch came, he ate silently at a distance. When wardrobe changes happened, he stayed on his phone. When a crew member joked about weekend plans, he laughed but did not include her. She felt like a ghost. And yet, she did not cry. She did not ask. She did not show hurt. Years in the industry had taught her the skill of silence. But inside, a quiet storm had already begun. She respected Keanu more than most people she had ever worked with. She trusted him. She believed in the kind of friendship that did not need performance. So what was this cold distance? By evening, she told herself not to care anymore. People forget. Birthdays come and go. The world keeps moving. She tried to stay logical. But the truth was not logical. It was emotional. And emotions do not listen to logic. She did not want a gift or a speech. All she wanted was to feel remembered. When the final shot was done, Sandra gathered her things and walked toward her trailer. She tried to wear a calm expression so no one would ask questions. She opened the door and stepped inside, expecting darkness. The lights were off. The room was still. There were no decorations. No cake, no surprise, only silence again. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning. That was when everything finally hit her. The weight of the entire day, the quiet disappointment, the broken trust, the feeling of being unseen, not by the world, but by the one person who was never supposed to forget. She sat down slowly on the couch, placed her bag beside her, and leaned forward with her hands over her face. She did not sob loudly. She did not break down in a dramatic way. It was a quiet sadness, the kind that sinks in deep and does not announce itself. The kind that hurts more because it comes from someone you believed would never let you feel this way, she whispered to herself. I really thought he would remember. Just then, the door clicked. Her heart jumped, but she did not look up. She assumed it was just a crew member checking something. But the footsteps were slow, careful, familiar. She lifted her head. Keanu was standing inside the trailer, but he said nothing. He did not smile. He did not say her name. He did not say happy birthday. He just stood there calm and quiet, watching her with a look she could not understand. And that confusion sparked something inside her. This was not forgetfulness. This was something else, something she could not name yet, something bigger than a missed birthday wish, and for the first time all day, she felt a different kind of suspense, not the sadness of being forgotten, but the strange sense that something was being hidden, something intentional, something she was not meant to know yet. She wiped her eyes, trying to gather herself, and said gently, "You didn't forget." "Did you?" Keanu did not answer. He simply locked the door behind him, and the truth, whatever it was now finally beginning. The silence in the trailer felt different now. It was no longer the silence of being ignored. It was the silence before a truth appears. Sandra looked at Keanu, trying to understand what he was thinking, but his face gave nothing away. It was calm, unreadable, almost too still, as if he was holding back something heavy and waiting for the right moment. He walked further inside, placed something small on the table without saying a word, and then sat down across from her. There was still no birthday wish, no warm tone, no apology. Just patience in his eyes, like he was letting her feel everything before he spoke. Sandra finally broke the silence. "Keanu, all day you acted like nothing was special, not even a joke, not even a smile. Why?" He leaned back slightly and said in a quiet voice, "Because sometimes the only way to make a moment real is to let the weight of it be felt first." His answer only confused her more. She wanted a reason, a normal one, something simple like, "I was planning a surprise." But he spoke like there was something deeper, something she was not supposed to see yet. She stared at the small object he had placed on the table. It was a key. A simple metallic key with no label. She asked, "What is that?" Keanu did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked at her the way someone looks when they are deciding whether the truth will hurt or heal. "Before I tell you anything," he said softly, "I want you to understand something. Today was not about forgetting you. It was about remembering you in a way that no audience, no cameras, no birthday cake could ever do." Sandra felt her heart tighten again. She had always known Keanu had his own way of doing things, but this was different. This was personal in a way she could not define. "Why the key?" she asked again. He finally replied, "That key opens a room that belongs to you. But you will not understand it until you walk inside." She frowned gently. "A room? Where?" Keanu stood up and walked toward the door, then waited. It was clear he wanted her to follow. She hesitated for a second, unsure whether to feel angry, curious, or scared. But something inside her knew this was not a prank. This was not a joke. This was something carefully built, something that required silence before it could speak. She took the key, stood up, and followed him outside. The night air was cool and quiet as they walked. The set was mostly empty now. Only a few lights were on, and the crew had disappeared into cars and distant corners. Their footsteps echoed slightly, making the moment feel even more isolated. as if the world had stepped aside so this story could happen privately. They walked past the trailers, past the equipment, past the cameras covered in sheets. Sandra finally spoke again. "You could have just told me happy birthday." Keanu nodded. "I could have. And it would have made you smile for 5 seconds, but it would not have reached the place I was trying to reach." She looked at him closely. "And what place is that?" He stopped walking, turned to her, and said gently, "The place inside you that thinks nobody remembers the parts of your life before you became someone famous." Her breath paused. He was not talking about birthdays now. He was talking about something older, something quiet, something she never shared with anyone in full. They reached a door, an old storage room on the far side of the studio building. Nothing special from the outside, just a simple locked door with peeling paint. Keanu stepped aside. "Use the key," he said. Sandra felt a strange mix of fear and curiosity. She placed the key in the lock, turned it slowly, and pushed the door open. She froze. It was not a storage room anymore. It was a space filled with pieces of her past, real pieces, things she lost, things she forgot, things she never even realized someone had saved. On one side, there was an old music player, repaired and working. Next to it, a stack of cassette tapes, but not any tapes. Her tapes. Recordings of her singing when she was 14. Recordings she thought were damaged forever. On a desk, there was a small framed photo of her and her mother from a school play. The original photo had been torn years ago. This one was restored flawlessly. On another table, there was a worn-out bracelet. A cheap one. The kind she once bought from a street seller when she was a teenager with no money. She lost it long before she became an actress. And yet here it was, cleaned, polished, repaired. And then she saw something that made her hands tremble. A pair of old, faded sneakers with her initials written inside. Shoes she wore during her first acting rehearsals, back when she walked everywhere because she could not afford transportation. Everything in the room was not expensive. Nothing was glamorous. But it was more valuable than gold, because it was her life before the world saw her. She turned slowly toward Keanu, eyes filled with disbelief. "How did you even find these things?" He walked in calmly, hands in his pockets, speaking softly. "I did not want to give you a birthday you could post on social media. I wanted to give you the parts of yourself you thought were lost forever," she whispered. "But how did you know?" Keanu looked at her in the most respectful way. "Because I listen. Because sometimes when people talk about their past, they do not realize which memories are still bleeding quietly inside them." She felt her throat tighten. "I never told anyone about some of these things." "You did," he said. "Not with words. But in the way you talked. In the way your voice changed when you mentioned your mother. In the way you held your wrist when you remembered the bracelet. In the way your eyes softened when you spoke about walking home in those shoes." She stared at him, unable to speak. Keanu continued, "People think friendship is about celebrating success. But real friendship is about protecting the parts of someone's soul that the world has no idea exists." Sandra felt a slow tear fall, but it was not the kind of tear that came from sadness alone. It was the tear that comes when someone finally feels seen. Not as an actress, not as a star, not as a public figure, but as a real human being with old scars and quiet memories. She sat down on the small wooden bench inside the room. The emotions were too many, too layered, too unexpected. "You pretended to forget," she said in a low voice. "I had to," Keanu replied. "If I wished you happy birthday early, you would have expected something normal. But this was not supposed to feel normal. This was supposed to feel like walking back into a part of your life that no spotlight can reach." She looked around again. Every object was a part of her story. Not the story people know. The story she carried alone. She asked quietly, "How long have you been planning this?" Keanu sat beside her, calm and sincere. "Months. Maybe longer. I talked to people from your hometown. I found your old rehearsal teacher. I met someone who still had the cassette recorder. I asked the music shop guy to repair the tape. I tracked down the original bracelet seller. None of them knew who I was helping. I never mentioned your name. I just said it was for someone who deserved to feel remembered in a real way." Sandra covered her mouth with her hand. She could not believe the depth of what he had done. Not once had he asked for attention. Not once had he told anyone. Not once had he tried to look like a hero. He did everything in silence, because that was who he was. She whispered, "Why would you do all this? For me?" Keanu looked ahead, not at her, and said, "Because the world celebrates what you became. Someone needed to celebrate who you were before that." The words hit her deeper than anything she had heard in years. This was not a birthday gift. This was a restoration of self, a reminder that she was more than fame, more than applause, more than headlines. She was still the girl who walked miles in old shoes, who sang on broken tapes, who kept a cheap bracelet as a treasure. And someone saw that girl. Someone honored her without asking for anything back. She felt tears form again, but this time she did not hold them back. They fell gently, freely, without needing to be controlled. Keanu sat silently. He did not touch her. He did not comfort her physically. He respected the moment enough to let her feel it on her own. After a while, Sandra looked at him and asked softly, "Keanu, is there more?" He nodded once. "One last thing," he said. She waited, heart pounding again. "But you are not ready to see it yet." The room fell silent again, not the painful silence of being forgotten, but the suspense of something still hidden, something even deeper, something she did not expect, and she finally understood. This was not the end of the surprise. This was only the beginning. Sandra stayed seated in that quiet room, surrounded by the pieces of her past, unable to move for a few seconds. She felt like time itself had stopped to let her breathe in memories she never expected to see again. Every object in that room had a heartbeat of its own, and each one was connected to a version of her that the world never knew. Not the movie star, not the award winner, not the face on the magazine, but the girl who once dreamed in silence, worked in silence, and survived in silence. She finally looked at Keanu again, her eyes still filled with emotion and confusion. "You said there is something more," she whispered. "What does that mean?" Keanu did not answer right away. He had a habit of letting silence speak first, as if silence knew the truth before words did. He walked slowly around the room, observing everything with the same calm expression he always carried. But there was a softness in his eyes now, a quiet kind of care that did not need to be spoken. "What more could there be?" Sandra asked again, not with impatience but with a soft ache in her voice. Keanu finally turned to her and said, "There are some things that cannot be given through objects. Some things have to be understood through the right moment. And the moment is not here yet." She stared at him, searching his face. "Why do I feel like you are hiding something that is not just a surprise?" Keanu held her gaze for a long time. Then he said something that made her heart shift again. "Because this is not about a birthday anymore." She felt a chill in her chest. "Then what is it about?" He walked closer, not too close, just enough that his voice could be softer without losing its power. "It is about a part of your life you closed a long time ago. A part that never healed, and it is something you never got a chance to face properly. Not because you were weak, but because you had to keep moving." Sandra felt something inside her tighten again. She did not know what he meant, but she could feel the truth behind his words. She had lived a life where strength was a costume she wore every day, even when her heart was breaking quietly behind the scenes. She had faced loss, rumors, pressure, loneliness, and the constant demand to be strong for everyone. She knew how to keep walking. She did not always know how to stop and feel. She looked at the restored bracelet, the old music tape, the sneakers, the photo of her and her mother. Every object had a story, but every story also had a crack. And now she wondered, was Keanu trying to fix the cracks, or was he preparing her to finally look at them? "You think I am not ready?" she said softly. Keanu nodded. "Not yet, but you will be. And when you are, I will tell you the last part." She sat back, trying to process everything. Part of her wanted answers now. Part of her knew that the timing mattered. Every chapter of her life had come at a cost. Fame, sacrifice, grief, survival. And now someone was slowing down time for her, forcing her to feel instead of perform. She asked quietly, "When did you start doing all this?" Keanu sat across from her again. "The day you said something most people ignored. She frowned slightly. What did I say? He looked at her with the kind of honesty that left no space for acting. You said, I cannot remember the last time someone saw me without expecting something from me. Sandra's breath caught in her throat. She remembered saying that, but she had said it casually as a passing sentence during a long break between filming. She was tired that day, emotionally tired, and Keanu had just listened, the way he always did. He never tried to cheer her up. He never tried to fix the moment. He just listened, and he remembered, she whispered. I did not think anyone even took that seriously. Keanu replied, I did. The words were simple, but they carried a weight she could feel all the way through her chest. He was not the type of friend who told stories about loyalty. He was the type who quietly proved it. She took a slow breath. All this time, you let me think you forgot. Keanu nodded. Because if I told you what I was doing, you would not have let yourself feel what you needed to feel today. Sandra closed her eyes for a moment. She replayed the entire day in her mind. The silence, the confusion, the disappointment, the ache of being ignored. And now she understood. He did not want her to feel loved instantly. He wanted her to feel the weight of being forgotten. First, because only then would the truth mean something. Deeper, she opened her eyes again and saw Keanu studying her expression not to judge, but to make sure she was okay. Do you want to know what hurt me the most today? She asked softly. Keanu nodded gently. It was not that you did not say happy birthday. It was that you acted like nothing in me mattered at all. He blinked slowly. That was the point. She looked at him confused again. What do you mean? Keanu leaned forward just a little, voice calm and sincere. I wanted you to feel what it is like when the world looks at you but does not see you, because that is the version of you the world will never understand, and that is the version I wanted to protect. She stared at him, unable to speak for a moment. You wanted me to feel forgotten, she said slowly, trying to piece it together. Yes, he replied. Because you have spent too many years pretending you were okay with being remembered only for what you do, not for who you are. The words hit a place inside her she did not even know was open. She whispered, And you think this will make me face it? Keanu nodded. This will make you feel it, and when you feel it, you will finally understand why the last part matters. Sandra looked around the room again. Every object was something she had once let go of, not by choice, but because life pushed her forward. But now they were back, like lost pages being returned to a book she never finished reading. She stood up slowly and walked toward the old music recorder. She picked up one of the tapes, the one with her handwriting on it, the one she thought she lost when she moved out of her childhood home. Her fingers shook as she placed it into the recorder and pressed play. A soft, shaky teenage voice filled the room, her voice, singing a song she wrote at 14, a song about wishing for a future she was not sure she deserved. The recording was rough, the words were innocent, and the emotion was real. She closed her eyes and let it wash over her. She felt a tear slip down her cheek, but this time she did not wipe it away. She let it fall. Keanu did not move. He did not interrupt. He just let the song breathe between them. When the tape clicked to an end, Sandra opened her eyes and whispered, I forgot this song existed. Keanu spoke very softly. The world knows the woman you became, but someone needed to remind you of the girl you were. Sandra turned slowly toward him again. You keep saying someone needed to remind me, she said quietly. But why did it have to be you? Keanu looked at her calmly. Because I was the only one who noticed you were still searching for her. She felt something inside her crack. Not in a breaking way, in a releasing way. She had spent years learning how to be strong, successful, admired. But she had never learned how to be acknowledged for the parts that came before all that. Keanu, she whispered, voice shaking, I do not know how to thank you for this. He shook his head slowly. You do not need to thank me. This is not a gift. This is something you already owned. I just brought it back. She nodded slowly, breathing deeply. But the curiosity still lingered. And the last part? She asked again. Keanu finally stood up. You will see it, but not tonight. She blinked. Why not? He looked at her with a softness that almost hurt. Because the last part is not an object. It is a truth, and truths only land the right way when the heart is ready. She sat back down, feeling both comforted and unsettled. So what am I supposed to do now? Keanu walked toward the door and paused. Remember, he said gently, not the world, not the spotlight. Just remember yourself. Then he unlocked the door and stepped outside, leaving Sandra standing in the middle of that room filled with her forgotten pieces. She looked around once more. The bracelet, the photo, the shoes, the cassette tape, the restored music recorder. Each one whispered a different part of her life. Each one reminded her of the person she used to be, the person she never meant to abandon. She sat back down slowly, and for the first time in years, she let herself feel small again. Not weak, just human. And somewhere in the distance, she knew the real surprise had not happened yet, because whatever Keanu was about to reveal next was the part even she did not expect. The room felt different after Keanu left. Not empty, not silent, but alive in a quiet way Sandra could not explain. Every object in that space seemed to breathe with her. It was like the walls held stories, and the air held memories she never thought she would see again. She sat there for a long time, just listening to the soft hum of the old recorder and the distant sounds outside. The world felt far away, and for once she did not feel like an actress or a public figure. She felt like a person sitting inside her own childhood. But as the night stretched on, another feeling began to rise inside her. Not sadness, not even gratitude. Something sharper. Questions. Confusion. A kind of emotional disorientation that came from being handed pieces of her past without knowing why. She whispered to the empty room. "What are you doing, Keanu?" Because now it was bigger than a birthday, bigger than a surprise, bigger than nostalgia. He had said the last part was not an object. He had said it was a truth. And that truth, whatever it was, seemed to be something he was protecting, not just revealing. She stood up slowly and walked around the room again, this time looking deeper. She noticed small notes attached to some objects, not written by Keanu, but markings from time. The edges of the photo frame had tiny cracks. The bracelet still had a faint scratch from when she fell off her bike at 15. The sneakers still had faded dirt on the soles. Proof of long walks she once took because she could not afford bus. Money. Everything here was real. And that realness made her realize something painful. She had not been missing these objects. She had been missing herself. She took a slow breath and walked out of the room, locking it carefully. She did not want anyone else to see it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. As she stepped outside, she saw Keanu sitting alone on a bench near the studio lot. The night sky above them was quiet, and the stars were barely visible under the city glow. But there was a stillness that made the moment feel suspended. She walked toward him, not quickly, not forcefully, just with the kind of steps someone takes when they are no longer sure what they are supposed to feel. Keanu looked up as she approached. He did not smile. He did not ask if she was okay. He just made space for her to sit beside him. She sat down slowly and stared ahead, not at him. "You knew this would break me a little," she said softly. Keanu nodded once. Sometimes breaking is the only way to open what has been sealed too long. She let the words settle, and then she spoke again, almost in a whisper. "Why do you care this much?" Keanu did not rush to answer. He rested his hands together, elbows on his knees, and said, "Because there are people in this world who spend their whole lives showing strength, and no one ever gives them permission to be seen in their softness." Sandra turned to him, eyes filled with slow tears. "But why me? Why did you choose to do this for me?" Keanu looked at her with the calmness of someone who had already thought of this question many times. "Because you give so much of yourself to the world," he said gently. "And I have watched the world take it without ever asking what it cost you." She looked away again, blinking slowly. She was not crying in sadness anymore. It was something else. Something closer to relief but still mixed with fear. The fear of being truly seen. She asked, "And the last part? Is it something I did? Or something I do not know yet?" Keanu's voice softened even more. It is something you never got the chance to face. Not because you were weak, but because life did not pause long enough to let you. Sandra stared at the ground. She tried to think of all the things she had not faced. There were many, too many. A career built on constant movement leaves little time to grieve, to rest, to heal. She looked at him again. Are you sure I am ready? Keanu did something he rarely did. He smiled, but not the smile people see on camera. It was a real one, quiet, almost sad, but full of respect. Not yet, he said softly. But you are closer than you have ever been. A long pause followed. Not awkward, just heavy. Then Keanu stood up. You should go home tonight, he said. Sleep. Let your mind settle. Tomorrow will feel different. Sandra looked at him, unsure if she wanted to argue or agree. She had more questions, but she also knew there were no shortcuts to what was coming. She nodded slowly. Okay. She turned to walk away, but then stopped and looked back. Keanu, if this is going to hurt, just tell me. He held her eyes. It will not hurt, he said. It will release what is already hurting. She took in a slow breath, then walked toward her car, holding the key to the room tightly in her hand. It felt heavier now, not because of metal, but because of meaning. The drive home was quiet. She left the radio off. She did not want noise. She just wanted to understand herself again. She looked at her hands on the steering wheel and realized she did not even recognize the way they trembled. She parked outside her house. She sat in the car for a moment, staring straight ahead, thinking about the girl in the cassette tape, the girl with the bracelet, the girl with the sneakers. She was still here somewhere, hidden behind fame, success, and years of people expecting strength, she whispered to herself. I forgot how to be her. For the first time in a long time, she let her guard fall, not in public, not on camera, not for anyone else, just for herself. She walked inside, turned off all the lights, and sat on the floor in the quiet darkness. She did not cry. Not yet, she just sat. And the silence finally felt like something she could breathe in. As the night slowly passed, something inside her shifted. Not fully, not clearly, but slowly, like an old door beginning to open. She woke up the next morning with a thought on her mind. Whatever the last part was, it was not about gifts. It was about truth, and truth has weight. She got ready and returned to the studio, not because she had to film that day, but because she knew Keanu would be there, waiting. When she arrived, he was already sitting outside the same building, calm as always, almost as if he knew she would come. She walked up to him. I am ready, she said softly. He stood up slowly. Then come with me. They walked through the lot again, but this time, they were not heading toward the room with the objects. They were headed somewhere else. Sandra did not ask where. She just followed, feeling her heart beat slower and heavier. Keanu led her into a different space, a quiet room with no decorations, no lights, no objects, nothing but two chairs facing each other. She looked around, confused. What is this? Keanu walked to the center and stopped. This, he said, is where the last part begins. She looked at him slowly. There is nothing here. Exactly, he replied. Because the last part is not something I show you. It is something you have to speak. She frowned slightly. Speak? Keanu nodded. You have never said out loud what you lost when you became who the world wanted you to be. She looked at him, breathing slowly. You want me to talk about it? His voice stayed calm. Not like an interview, not like a speech. Just like a person who is finally allowed to say the things she had to stay silent about to keep moving. She looked at the empty room. Suddenly it made sense. He had given her everything she once owned. Now he wanted her to give voice to the things she never said. Keanu, she whispered, I do not even know where to start. He sat down. Start with the moment you stopped being the girl in the cassette tape. Sandra felt her throat tighten. She sat down too. She took a slow breath, and for the first time, she spoke about something she had hidden for years. Not a scandal, not a headline, something real, something broken. And while she talked, Keanu did not interrupt. He only listened, really listened, because That was the last part. Not objects, not gifts, not memories, but the space to finally speak what had never been, spoken. And as Sandra spoke, her voice shook. But she did not stop, and the more she spoke, the lighter her heart became, because she finally understood. He did not collect her past to remind her how far she had come. He collected it, so she could finally stop running from it. The room stayed quiet as Sandra continued speaking, and with every word she let out, she felt something strange happening inside her. It was not pain. It was the slow release of pain she did not know she was still holding. She talked about success, pressure, expectations, the fear of losing herself, the loneliness behind fame, the constant demand to smile, and the nights no one saw when she felt empty even in a full room. Keanu said nothing. He just listened, the same way he always had, without judgment, without interruption, without trying to fix anything. It was the kind of listening that did not make her feel watched, but understood. When she finally paused, her voice soft and tired, she said, "I never had the chance to say any of that before. People always want the strong version, the funny version, the everything is fine version." Keanu nodded slowly. "That is why the last part was never a gift. It was a space." She breathed deeply. "And you think talking about it changes something?" Keanu looked at her gently. "You cannot heal what you never say out loud." She let that sit in the air. After a moment, she asked, "So is this why you pretended to forget my birthday? To make me talk?" He shook his head. "No, I pretended to forget so you would feel the silence that lives under your life. The silence you never let anyone see." Sandra stared at him, realizing how carefully this entire day had been shaped. The silence, the confusion, the pain of being unseen, the room full of memories, the space to speak. None of it was random. He had built a quiet path back to herself. "Why did you go to this level for me?" she asked softly. He replied in the calmest voice, "Because I know what it is like to live with the parts of yourself no one ever asks about. And I promised myself long ago that if I ever saw someone carrying that kind of weight, I would not let them carry it alone." She looked at him, and for the first time she understood something. Keanu was not fixing her life. He was simply making room for her soul to breathe. Sandra wiped her face and gave a small, fragile smile. "I thought today was going to hurt forever. But somehow it feels like the first day I am not pretending." Keanu nodded. "That is the point. The world celebrates who you became. But I wanted you to remember who you were, so you could finally see they are the same person." She thought about that for a moment. Then she asked softly, "And now? Is this the end of it?" Keanu shook his head. "No. There is one more thing." Her heart jumped again. "Another object?" she asked. "No," he said. "This time, it is something only you can do." She waited. He looked at her and said quietly, "You have to go back into that room tomorrow, alone, and choose one thing to take with you. One object you will not hide in storage, not lock away, not keep as a memory, something you will carry into your life again." She frowned slightly, not understanding. "Why?" Keanu replied. "Because the girl you used to be does not need to stay in the past. She needs to walk into your future too." She felt her chest tighten again, but this time, not from sadness, from recognition. He was not asking her to relive her past. He was asking her to reclaim it. "One object," she repeated softly. "Yes," he said, "only one. But you must choose it with your heart, not your mind. And when you choose it, that will be the moment the surprise is complete." She nodded slowly, absorbing the instruction. It made sense in a way she could not explain yet. After a long, quiet moment, she looked at him and said, "Thank you for seeing me." Keanu gave a small nod, the kind of nod that meant, "You do not need to thank me." And then he stood up. "Tomorrow," he said gently. "Come when you are ready." He walked toward the door and paused only once, not to look at her, but to leave space for her silence. After he left, Sandra sat alone again, but this time the silence did not feel lonely. It felt like a beginning. She knew tomorrow would not just be about choosing an object. It would be about choosing a part of herself to bring back to life. And somewhere deep inside, she already knew whatever she chose. It would not be because it was pretty. It would be because it still hurt, and because it was finally time to heal it. The next morning arrived with a strange stillness. Sandra woke up before her alarm, not because she was rested, but because something inside her knew this day would not be like any other. She sat on the edge of her bed for a moment, holding the thought of the room in her mind. The bracelet, the shoes, the cassette, the photo, the pieces of her that had been waiting in silence for years. She got dressed quietly. No makeup, no styling, no mirror check. She did not need the version of herself the world was used to seeing. She just needed to be the girl who once sang into a cheap recorder with dreams she did not know how to name. On the way to the studio, she kept replaying Keanu's words. Choose one object, not with your mind, with your heart, and bring it into your life again. It sounded simple, but it was not. Because she now understood the real question. Which part of her story was she finally ready to carry? Not as a memory, but as a truth she no longer needed to hide. When she arrived, the studio lot was quiet. No camera crews, no noise, no pressure. Just the morning air and the soft echo of her footsteps. The key felt warm in her hand, as if the room itself was waiting. She reached the door, took a breath, unlocked it, and stepped inside. Nothing had changed. Every object was still where it was, untouched, unarranged. Nothing had been labeled or staged for effect. It was all real, and it was all still. She walked slowly, taking in the room again, but this time, not with shock, not with sadness, not with disbelief, with ownership. She touched the cassette tape gently. That voice in the recording was her, the purest version of herself. But she did not choose it. She held the sneakers, the weight of her teenage years, the miles she walked, the dreams she carried on tired feet. But she did not choose them either. She looked at the photo of her and her mother. It almost broke her again. But she knew that memory lived in her heart already. She did not need to hold it in her hand. And then she saw it. The bracelet. The same bracelet she bought as a teenager with the little money she had. Cheap, simple, nothing glamorous. But it meant something. It was the first thing she ever bought for herself. Not because it was valuable, but because it was hers. She remembered losing it. Not just the object, but the version of herself who believed small things mattered even when no one else noticed. She picked it up slowly, held it in her palm, and something inside her settled. This was the object. This was the part of her she was ready to bring back. Not the talent, not the fame, not the success, the girl who valued something simple just because it held meaning. She closed her hand around it, and for the first time in years, her heart felt like it was not split in two. Just then, she heard a soft knock. She turned. Keanu was standing at the door. No smile, no speech, no happy birthday even now. Just quiet presence. He looked at the bracelet in her hand and nodded gently, as if he had known she would choose it. He walked in and stood beside her, both of them looking at the room one last time. "Why this one?" he asked softly. Sandra took a breath and said, "Because this was the first time I ever gave myself something. Not to impress anyone, not to prove anything, not to survive anything, just because it made me happy." Keanu nodded slowly. "And do you know why I wanted you to choose one object?" he asked. She looked at him, waiting. "Because everything else in this room belongs to your past," he said. "But the bracelet belongs to your future." She felt tears again, but this time they did not hurt. "They released something," she whispered. "You wanted me to remember that I was enough before the world decided I was." Keanu nodded, and then came the final reveal. Not loud, not dramatic, but deeply human, he said quietly. "I did not bring these things into your life. I just returned what was always yours. The real surprise was not the objects. The real surprise was that you finally saw yourself the way I always did." Sandra felt her chest soften. Not break, not fall apart, just soften into truth. And then she realized something important. The entire birthday prank was never about being forgotten. It was about being found. She looked at Keanu, not with shock, not with confusion, but with the calm understanding that only comes when a person finally sees the reason behind kindness. "You never forgot my birthday," she said. Keanu replied, "No, I remembered it in a way that would not disappear with balloons or candles." She gave a small smile, the kind that comes from a healed place, not a happy place, and he added one last line. The line that completed everything: "The best birthday is not when people celebrate you. It is when someone reminds you who you are." They stood there in silence. Not awkward, not emotional, just real. Two people who understood each other without needing noise. Sandra closed the bracelet around her wrist, and in that simple action, the story came full circle. Not because she was given a gift, but because she finally received herself. The room did not need to exist anymore. Its purpose was complete. Sandra stepped out into the sunlight. Keanu walked beside. Her nothing needed to be said, because the loudest moments in life are often silent, and the deepest kindness is the kind the world never sees.